I need you to say it was your approval, Dana. The words hit like a gut punch. I stared across the conference table at Bryce Camden, our new vice president, as 20 stunned faces turned to me. My pulse thudded in my ears. It wasn't me, Bryce. You know that, I said quietly, barely holding my voice steady. His smile didn't flicker. Calm, practiced, like this moment had been choreographed. Then I'm afraid you're leaving us no choice. Just like that. After 8 years of unwavering commitment to Caldera Freight Systems, this was how it ended. I was fired in front of the entire executive team. Effective immediately. Someone gasped. A pen clattered to the floor. The room spun. Bryce sat back in his chair, brushing invisible lint from his $2,000 jacket, like this was just another Tuesday. I scanned the room. Shock on some faces, guilt on others. Not a single person spoke up. My name is Dana Holloway. I'm 43. 2 hours ago, I was the Senior Logistics Operations Manager at Caldera Freight in Phoenix, Arizona. I gave that company everything holidays, weekends, 4 a.m. crisis calls. And now, I was in my car parked in the lower garage, staring blankly at the steering wheel. 8 years, gone. I'd overhauled our carrier bid process, cut annual waste by $700,000, and hadn't missed a deadline in years. But none of that mattered. Not to Bryce. He'd been here less than a year. Charming, strategic, and clearly looking for a scapegoat. I should have seen it coming. The red flags started 10 weeks ago, right after Bryce returned from his Aspen retreat. He called me into his office, sleek, overpriced furniture window view of Camelback Mountain. Going forward, I'll be handling all vendor approvals over $100K, he said without looking up. Just until I get a better feel for operations. My access began vanishing after that. Meeting invites disappeared. My authority quietly eroded. I chalked it up to growing pains. I wanted to believe he meant well. But now, sitting in my Honda in that concrete tomb of a parking structure, I knew better. I'd been targeted. And somewhere deep inside me, something clicked. I wasn't going to let this slide. Not this time. Dana. I've been thinking, Bryce said, not looking up from his laptop. I want to take a more hands-on approach with our major vendor relationships this quarter. I shifted in the stiff leather chair across from his desk. Okay, what exactly do you have in mind? I'll be handling the large approvals directly. Anything over $100 or $300 comes through me first. He finally glanced up and gave me that polished, practiced smile. It's just temporary. I want to better understand the workflow. It sounded reasonable enough. Bryce was ambitious new blood trying to make waves. If he wanted to micromanage for a while, I figured I could live with that. Sure, I said, nodding. Whatever you think is best. But as I walked back down the corridor toward my office, something gnawed at me. Bryce had never cared about operations. He thrived on strategy presentations and executive visibility. Why this sudden shift into the trenches? The changes came quickly. First, I lost access to our primary logistics vendor database. Then, without warning, my approval threshold dropped from $250,000 to $100,000. Calendar invites for meetings I used to lead gone. When I asked Bryce, he had canned answers ready. Oh, that meeting's just executives now, he'd say with a dismissive wave. Nothing urgent. Or, that database issue, just an IT thing. They'll fix it soon. But no one from IT ever followed up. And the meetings, they kept happening, just without me. Little by little, I was being pushed out of my own role. And the worst part, he made it feel like it was all in my head. Are you okay, Dana? You've seemed a little off lately, he said one afternoon, concern dripping with condescension. That's when I started documenting everything. Every missing invite, every revoked permission, every smug deflection. Call it instinct, but something told me I'd need it. The bombshell landed on a stormy Thursday in April. I was reviewing a stack of invoices when one nearly made me drop my coffee. $350,000 from Trans-Edge Freight for expedited shipping. I froze. 2 weeks earlier, I'd flagged this same invoice grossly inflated, unauthorized, and suspicious. I'd marked it for denial. But now, it showed my approval. And the system confirmed it. My hand shook as I opened the audit trail. There it was, plain as day, approved by D. Holloway. Time-stamped yesterday. Except I hadn't touched that invoice in weeks. Approved by D. Holloway with yesterday's timestamp. Except I'd been in back-to-back meetings all day. I hadn't signed off on anything over $10,000 in weeks. My chest tightened as I grabbed my phone. Bryce picked up after 2 rings. "Bryce, we have a problem," I said, trying to stay calm. "That TransEdge invoice for $350K went through, but I didn't approve it." A pause. Then, "What are you talking about, Dana?" "The invoice," I flagged. "It got pushed through using my credentials." "Are you sure you didn't approve it?" His voice was dipped in that same patronizing tone. "You've been a little overwhelmed lately." I gritted my teeth. "I'm sure. We need to look into this immediately." "I'll check into it and circle back," he said quickly, but he never called back. The next morning, Bryce's assistant sent a calendar invite that stopped me cold. Emergency vendor review. Executive attendance mandatory. I wasn't on the list. 20 minutes before it began, Bryce appeared at my desk wearing that same smug smile. "Dana, we'd like you to join us in the boardroom. We're addressing the TransEdge situation." The room was packed. Caldera's CEO, Victoria Langston, sat at the head of the long glass table. The company's top brass surrounded her legal finance compliance ops. Bryce stood at the front like he was delivering closing arguments. A giant screen displayed the invoice in question. My name, my timestamp. "This appears to be a serious lapse in our vendor management process." He began smoothly. "A $350,000 invoice was approved outside standard protocol." All eyes shifted to me. "This approval came from Dana Holloway's account." Bryce continued. "This responsibility falls squarely under her department." Victoria's voice cut in sharp, deliberate. "Dana, can you explain?" My heart pounded. I felt Bryce watching, waiting for me to fold. But I didn't. It wasn't me. The room fell silent. Bryce's expression didn't break, but something shifted behind his eyes. "I'm sorry, could you clarify?" Victoria asked. "I never approved that invoice," I said, my voice gaining strength. "I flagged it 2 weeks ago as suspicious. Someone used my login to push it through." Bryce stepped forward. "Dana, the system logs show your credentials. Are you suggesting your account was compromised?" "I'm suggesting someone with administrative access altered the record. And I think we both know who had that kind of access. Pushed it through and made it look like I approved it." The implication sat heavy in the air. If you believe in justice and the power of truth, hit that subscribe button and join me, because the next chapter is just around the corner and you won't want to miss what happens next. Everyone in that room knew Bryce had full administrative access to the approval system. His jaw clenched. "That's a serious accusation, Dana." "Do you have any actual proof I have documentation?" I replied. "Screenshots showing I flagged the invoice weeks ago as suspicious. Screenshots you could have created after the fact," he shot back. "Look, the system shows your login. This happened under your credentials, under your oversight." CEO Victoria Langston's expression was beginning to strain. "Dana?" she said, measured but firm. "Sometimes taking responsibility is part of professional growth. Bryce is giving you a chance to walk us through where your process failed." 20 faces stared at me, some blank, some expectant, a few visibly uncomfortable. Only one, Janine from HR, seemed uneasy, like she knew something wasn't right. "I won't take responsibility for something I didn't do," I said calmly but clearly. Bryce exhaled with dramatic flair. "Then I'm afraid we have no choice but to terminate your employment. Effective immediately." I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't text my best friend or call my sister. I just followed the security guard out, cardboard box in hand. 8 years of loyalty packed into a few sad personal items in a dying office plant. I sat in my Honda for 20 minutes staring at a cold concrete wall. A few colleagues walked by, some glancing in awkward sympathy. By lunch, the entire office would know Dana Holloway had been fired over a $350K vendor scandal. Eventually, I drove home to my quiet apartment in Tempe. Upstairs, I set the box on the kitchen counter. Then I walked into my home office, and opened the filing cabinet. Thank God I'd trusted my instincts. I pulled out the evidence-printed emails, audit logs, flagged invoices, notes, screenshots, 2 months' worth of quiet documentation showing Bryce slowly cutting me out. But I needed more than breadcrumbs. I needed the fire. And I knew exactly where to find it. Bryce assumed I only had access to current systems. What he didn't know was that 3 years ago, I helped design the backup protocols for Caldera's approval infrastructure and my read-only access to archive systems. Still active, buried in an old IT ticket no one had touched since. That was his mistake. And my opportunity. I logged into the archive server and pulled up the approval history for the TransEdge invoice. My hands trembled as the screen loaded. There it was, the original authorization. Not mine. Bryce Camden. Timestamp. 11:47 p.m. 2 days ago. 6 hours later, the record was altered. My name now sat where his had been. He hadn't just approved it. He'd gone back in and scrubbed the system clean, rewriting history and pinning it on me. But the archive server doesn't lie. I had screenshots of the original entry, the exact modification timestamp, and even the IP address linked to the change. It came from Bryce's laptop. I printed everything. 3 copies. 1 for me, 1 for legal backup, and 1 for the only person whose decision mattered. Then I kept digging. Over the next few hours, a pattern emerged. This wasn't Bryce's first cover-up. For the past 6 months, he'd quietly approved dozens of bloated invoices, then reassigned the approvals to others after the fact. I found 5 names. I wasn't his first scapegoat, just the biggest one to date. I spent all weekend compiling my evidence, 47 pages of screenshots, logs, cross-referenced records, and internal emails that traced his manipulation step by step. But I didn't call Victoria Langston. I didn't alert HR. And I didn't hire a lawyer. Instead, I printed the full report, bound it neatly, and mailed it to the executive assistant of Caldera's CEO with no return address. I included a single-page cover letter, Ms. Langston. The attached documentation raises serious concerns about recent vendor approvals and personnel decisions. All material can be verified through internal archives. No name, no emotion, just facts. I dropped it off first thing Monday morning from a small post office on the edge of Tempe. Then I went home. If Victoria was the leader I believed she was, she'd act. If not, I'd still sleep knowing I told the truth. Meanwhile, Bryce had no clue. According to Janine from HR, who texted me, despite probably breaking protocol, he was celebrating. He's telling people you had a breakdown, she wrote, that you panicked and blamed him when you realized your mistake. He'd spun the story flawlessly. Bryce Camden composed and competent. Dana Holloway overwhelmed and unstable. Her next message made me sick. He's lobbying for a promotion to senior VP. He says he needs more authority to prevent future mistakes like yours. Janine texted, so that was Bryce's endgame frame, me play the fixer and secure a promotion on the back of my downfall. He'd orchestrated everything, remove the obstacle position himself as the solution, and scale the ladder. He probably thought he was untouchable now, but there was one thing Bryce hadn't accounted for. Victoria Langston didn't build a $50 million company by trusting surface-level stories. She was methodical, analytical, and absolutely ruthless when something didn't add up. My anonymous report should have landed on her desk by now. All I could do was wait and hope she lived up to the reputation. 3 weeks after my termination, I got a text from Janine that made me smile for the first time in days. A screenshot. Internal audit meeting, mandatory attendees, Bryce Camden, finance director, 2 IT specialists, and Victoria Langston. They're asking weird questions, Janine wrote later. Someone from audit spent 2 hours with IT yesterday. Bryce looked tense. She added, he snapped at his assistant this morning. Over nothing. I could picture him wrapped in his expensive suits and carefully curated confidence, now sweating under the microscope. Then came the message that nearly made me drop my phone. They found deleted files, she said, from the approval database. IT says someone tried to scrub records but didn't realize backups were auto-archived. My pulse kicked up. They were finding exactly what I'd hoped they would. Evidence Bryce thought he buried. The audit team had only just started, but the seams of his perfect lie were already fraying. And Victoria. She wasn't the type to stop halfway. Over the next week, internal investigators started pulling people into long meetings. 3 hours with Jessica in accounting yesterday, Janine texted. All about a spreadsheet. I remembered it clearly. It documented our entire vendor approval workflow start to finish. My name had been listed as the final reviewer for all major invoices, until it vanished. 2 weeks before I was fired, the spreadsheet had been mysteriously updated, my name gone. At the time, Bryce said it was a clerical mistake. We'll get it fixed soon, he'd told me. But of course, it never was. Now that clerical error was starting to look a lot like obstruction. And the truth? It was clawing its way to the surface. It never was. They're also reviewing every invoice Bryce approved in the last 6 months, Janine texted. There's a pattern: he transferred approvals to other people's accounts after the fact. So they'd found his other victims. The maintenance manager who got written up for overpriced industrial cleaners. The logistics coordinator who nearly lost her job over a suspicious fuel surcharge. Both times, Bryce had swooped in afterward, playing the heroic VP who caught the problem just in time, demanding accountability and praising his own oversight. Now, Victoria Langston was seeing the full pattern. I wondered how Bryce was sleeping at night. Not well, apparently. Janine's updates painted the picture of a man slowly cracking. He snapped at the receptionist over the coffee order she wrote, slammed his office door so loud it rattled. Then later, caught him in the storage closet, yelling on the phone. Didn't know I was nearby. His calm was unraveling. For months, Bryce had operated with polished confidence. Untouchable. Untouchable. Until now. Investigators were tearing through every system he accessed, every record he altered, and the cracks were widening. Oh, and get this, Janine added. He's been casually asking people if they've heard from you. But it's not casual. Everyone can tell he's nervous. That made me pause. Was he worried I might strike back? Or was he planning a preemptive smear campaign? I decided to be extra cautious in how I communicated, even with Janine. Bryce was dangerous when cornered. 2 days later, I mailed my second anonymous package to Victoria. This one, even more damning. A recording of the Zoom meeting where Bryce had verbally approved the TransEdge invoice. I'd originally been invited to the call, but Bryce had removed me from the final calendar update, whether by accident or intention, I'll never know. What he didn't realize was that the meeting organizer had sent me the recording link afterward. I'd saved the file along with metadata proving when the meeting occurred and when it was recorded. At the 23-minute mark, Bryce's voice was crystal clear. Yeah, approve the TransEdge charges. We need to expedite it. The premium's justified. No hesitation, no review, just a unilateral verbal go-ahead for a $350,000 invoice. The same day, he claimed he'd only just discovered the discrepancy, and this time, I had him in his own words. This wasn't just fraud anymore. It was perjury committed right in front of the entire executive team. I wondered how Victoria Langston would react when she heard Bryce's own voice contradict everything he told her. The response came fast. An emergency email just went out. Janine texted, barely able to contain her excitement. Bryce Camden was taking a personal leave of absence effective immediately. I stared at my phone, reading the message 3 times to make sure I wasn't dreaming. The email says he requested leave for personal reasons, Janine wrote. But no one believes that. Security had escorted him out an hour ago. Personal leave was corporate code for suspension pending investigation. Victoria was moving Bryce off the board while auditors finished building their case. You should see the office, Janine added. People are whispering in groups trying to figure out what really happened. Susan from legal looks like she's seen a ghost. A rush of relief and satisfaction surged through me. After weeks of watching Bryce smugly enjoy his victory over me, justice was finally catching up. But this was just the beginning. A leave of absence wasn't the same as being fired. Bryce still had a chance to talk his way out if the evidence wasn't airtight. I needed to make sure Victoria had everything to finish the job. Over the following weeks, the full scope of Bryce's corruption came to light. Janine's texts grew more excited by the day. The auditors uncovered a pattern of fraud going back nearly 2 years. They found vendor kickbacks. Bryce was approving inflated contracts in exchange for personal payments. There was a paper trail leading to an offshore account. That explained the Bahamas vacation, the designer suits, and the leased luxury car. And those cost-saving bonuses he bragged about Janine said Bryce had been approving inflated invoices, then negotiating them down, claiming credit for the savings. The plan was diabolical. Bryce would approve a $100,000 invoice that should have been $60,000, negotiate it down to $70,000, and pocket a bonus for saving the company $30,000. Meanwhile, the company still overpaid by $10,000, and Bryce collected rewards for excellent vendor management. Legal was considering criminal fraud charges. I imagined Bryce sitting in his expensive apartment, lawyers by his side, trying to unravel how his perfect scheme collapsed. Still clueless that I was behind the investigation. Then a call came. On a Thursday morning, 3 weeks into Bryce's leave. "Ms. Holloway, this is Victoria Langston," the voice said. "I'd like to meet with you tomorrow. Are you available?" My heart nearly stopped when the call came through. The CEO of Caldera Freight Systems was calling me personally. Somehow, I managed to say, "Yes, of course." "What time works for you?" "How about 10 a.m. in my office, Ms. Holloway? I owe you an apology." The meeting felt surreal. I sat across from Victoria Langston in her corner office, the same woman who had silently watched as Bryce Camden destroyed my career just 6 weeks earlier. "I'll be direct," Victoria began. "Our investigation has revealed you were set up by Bryce. The vendor approval you were blamed for was actually his doing, and he manipulated our systems to make it appear otherwise." I nodded, trying to look surprised. She continued, "We've also discovered someone provided us with crucial evidence exposing a broader pattern of fraud. I have a strong suspicion that someone was you." I met her gaze steadily. "I'm not sure what you mean." She smiled. "Fair enough. Regardless, I want to offer you a consulting contract to help rebuild our vendor management systems. Your rate will be $200 an hour. We estimate the project will last 6 months. $200 an hour for 6 months. Nearly $250,000. "I accept," I said. Walking back into Caldera's offices felt like stepping into a parallel universe. 6 weeks ago, I'd been escorted out in disgrace, carrying my belongings in a cardboard box. Now, I was returning as a highly paid consultant brought in to fix the very problems that led to my firing. The reactions were priceless. Some former colleagues avoided eye contact, likely embarrassed about believing Bryce's lies. Others offered awkward smiles and mumbled apologies. Janine from HR nearly tackled me with a hug. "I knew something was wrong," she whispered. Bryce's story never made sense. The most satisfying moment came when I passed Bryce's old office. The nameplate was gone. His expensive furniture removed, leaving only carpet indentations, where his desk had been a complete erasure of his presence. I was assigned a temporary office on the same floor with a view of downtown Phoenix and full system access to do my job properly. It felt like justice. Over the next weeks, whispered conversations and sideways glances slowly faded. People began treating me normally again, some even seeking my advice on vendor issues. The apologies came slowly, but surely. Tom from accounting caught me by the coffee machine. "Dana, I owe you an apology. I should have spoken up that day." Sarah from logistics was even more direct. "I always thought Bryce's story sounded off. I was too meticulous to make that kind of mistake." Even Janine confided she wanted to defend me at the termination meeting, but was afraid of losing her job. I didn't hold grudges. These weren't villains, just scared employees trying to survive in a corporate world where speaking up could cost you everything. But the apology that mattered most came from Jessica, the accounting manager, who'd been Bryce's previous scapegoat. "He did the same thing to me last year," she said quietly. "Made me question my memory. Wonder if I was going crazy. I'm sorry I didn't warn you," she added. "It's okay," I told her. None of us saw the full picture. That was Bryce's real skill isolating his victims, so we couldn't compare notes or see the pattern. The official termination announcement came on a Friday afternoon. Effective immediately, Bryce Camden was no longer employed by Caldera Freight Systems. No thanks for his years of service, no recognition of his contributions, just a cold corporate statement saying he was gone. Janine forwarded me the internal email chain that followed. Employees buzzed with questions. What had Bryce done? How long had it been going on? Were criminal charges coming? Victoria Langston called an all-hands meeting to address rumors. Some of you may be wondering about recent personnel changes, she said calmly. I want to assure you, we take financial integrity seriously. When misconduct comes to light, we act swiftly and decisively. She never named Bryce, but everyone knew who she meant. We're implementing new oversight measures to prevent this. In the future, Victoria continued, these changes will be developed with input from our consulting team. Heads turned toward me. Word had spread fast. I was the consultant brought in to fix the very vendor management system Bryce had corrupted. The irony was perfect. The woman he'd tried to destroy was now getting paid handsomely to clean up his mess. The ripple effect spread. 2 directors who supported Bryce during my firing suddenly found themselves under scrutiny. James Morrison, who nodded approvingly during Bryce's presentation against me, was quietly reassigned to a lesser role. Patricia Webb, who questioned my emotional stability in the meeting, received a formal reprimand. Victoria was sending a clear message: blind loyalty to corrupt leadership wouldn't be tolerated. Caldera announced a comprehensive compliance overhaul, reshaping the company culture for the better. The new vendor management system was built around the documentation and procedures I developed as a consultant. My name featured prominently in internal communications as the lead architect of the overhaul. Just 6 months ago, I was a mid-level operations manager, working quietly behind the scenes. Now, I was redesigning how a $50 million company managed its vendor relationships. The consulting contract opened doors beyond Caldera Freight. Word spread through industry circles about my role exposing Bryce Camden's fraud. Other companies contacted me to review their systems. By the time my contract ended, I had enough clients lined up to launch my own firm. 6 months later, I sat in my own office in a downtown Phoenix high-rise, looking out over the city through floor-to-ceiling windows. Holloway Consulting specialized in helping companies and employees protect themselves from workplace fraud and manipulation. My client list grew steadily filled with businesses wanting someone who understood corruption from the inside. The irony wasn't lost on me. Bryce's attempt to destroy my career had launched something far bigger and more successful than I ever imagined. Our tagline was simple and effective: we are the receipts. It captured exactly what I offered: documentation, evidence, and accountability in a corporate world where truth was often negotiable. My phone never stopped ringing. Companies needed fraud investigations. Employees suspected they were being set up. Whistleblowers wanted help organizing evidence. All had learned the same lesson I had. In a world of corporate lies and manipulation, documentation is power. I became very skilled at helping people document the truth. I never reached out to Bryce after his termination. No gloating, no angry emails, no twisting the knife. But through Janine and other former colleagues, I heard fragments of his story. He hired expensive lawyers, but couldn't fight the mountain of evidence. Criminal charges never materialized. Corporate fraud cases are notoriously hard to prosecute. His career was effectively over. No reputable company would hire him after the scandal. He'd burned bridges, betrayed colleagues, and ended up at a small logistics firm in Milwaukee, making a fraction of his former salary. Sometimes I felt a flicker of pity, not because he didn't deserve it, but because greed had made him ruin a promising career for pocket change. One afternoon, Janine texted me a photo of Caldera's new vendor dashboard, the system I designed during my contract. Clean, transparent, with audit trails that made Bryce-style manipulation impossible. 0 suspicious approvals in 6 months. That was my real victory. Not Bryce's downfall, though that was satisfying, but knowing I'd built something to protect future employees from what happened to me that was priceless. I leaned back, watching the Phoenix skyline as the sun set. My phone buzzed with missed calls, contract offers, and a speaking invitation. Not bad for someone fired for refusing to take the fall for someone else's mistakes. Bryce tried to erase me from the story, but instead he gave me something better: purpose. Hey everyone, thanks for sticking with me through this journey. If you've ever felt unfairly blamed or pushed out at work, I want you to know you're not alone. It's tough to stand up when the system seems stacked against you, but sometimes that courage is what changes everything. I'd love to hear your stories and advice. How have you handled situations where you were wrongly accused or underestimated? Drop a comment below to support me and share your own experiences. Your voices matter. And together, we can build a community that stands strong against injustice. Remember, in life and work, documentation is your best friend. Keep records, save emails, and trust your instincts when something feels off. It's not about being paranoid, it's about protecting yourself and your career. If you find yourself sidelined or blamed unfairly, don't stay silent. Speak up, gather proof, and seek allies. That's how real change starts. And if you're struggling right now, know that setbacks can be setups for a bigger comeback. Stay focused, be patient, and keep believing in your worth. I'm here with you, and your support means the world. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter of this story and more real-life battles won with courage and grit. Let's keep fighting the good fight together.